Ethan was a young man with dreams bigger than the small town he lived in. At just 26 years old, he had already faced more challenges than most people his age. Life hadn't been kind to him, but Ethan never let that break his spirit. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, ready to face another long day at the family workshop. The workshop wasn't much, just a creaky wooden shed filled with tools that were older than Ethan himself. But it was all he had left after his father passed away 2 years ago. His dad had taught him everything he knew about carpentry, from how to hold a hammer properly to the art of crafting beautiful furniture by hand. Now Ethan carried on his father's legacy, even though it felt like the world was working against him. The workshop barely made enough money to keep the lights on, let alone pay off the mounting debts left behind by his father's illness. But Ethan didn't complain. He believed that hard work and kindness would eventually lead him to better days. That belief kept him going when things got tough. On most days, he worked alone, sanding rough pieces of wood into smooth surfaces or fixing broken chairs brought in by neighbors who couldn't afford new ones. Sometimes people offered him odd jobs around town, repairing fences, building shelves, or even helping with home renovations. It wasn't glamorous work, but Ethan took pride in every project, no matter how small. To him, each piece of wood held potential, waiting to be transformed into something meaningful. Despite his struggles, Ethan always found time to help others. Whether it was lending a hand to an elderly neighbor struggling to carry groceries or fixing a child's toy without asking for payment, he believed that acts of kindness could make the world a little brighter. People in the town admired Ethan for his generosity, though many secretly worried about him. They saw how worn out his clothes were, how his truck sputtered and groaned whenever he drove it, and how tired he looked despite his cheerful smile. Still, Ethan refused to give up. He often told himself that life had ups and downs, and this was just one of the downs. Sooner or later, things would turn around. One chilly evening, as Ethan finished repairing a wobbly table for Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived down the street, he packed up his tools and headed home. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting the narrow road in shades of gray and black. The only sounds were the hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by the wind. Ethan drove slowly, his old truck rattling over potholes as he navigated the quiet countryside. He liked these moments of solitude, where the weight of his responsibilities faded slightly, replaced by the calming rhythm of the road. But tonight, something caught his eye, a flash of silver glinting under the dim glow of a distant street lamp. As he approached, he realized it was a car, sleek and expensive-looking, parked awkwardly on the shoulder of the road. Its hazard lights blinked steadily, warning other drivers to steer clear. Ethan frowned. Cars like that didn't belong on this stretch of road, especially not at night. Curiosity tugged at him, urging him to stop. After a moment's hesitation, he pulled over, parking his truck behind the mysterious vehicle. Stepping out into the cool air, Ethan walked toward the car, his boots crunching against the gravel. Through the tinted windows, he couldn't see anyone inside. Just as he was about to knock on the driver's side door, he heard a soft groan. Turning toward the sound, he spotted a figure sitting on the curb a few feet away. It was a woman, her suit rumpled and her hair messy, holding her ankle and grimacing in pain. Her phone lay shattered beside her, its screen cracked beyond repair. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with concern. The woman looked up, startled. For a moment, she seemed unsure whether to trust him. Then, with a sigh, she nodded, weakly. "I'm fine," she said, though her expression told a different story. "Just twisted my ankle. I don't think I can drive." Ethan knelt beside her, examining her injury carefully. "You might have sprained it," he said gently. "We should get you to a doctor." She hesitated again, her sharp gaze studying him. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Thank you," she murmured. "My name's Claire, by the way." "I'm Ethan," he replied with a warm smile. Without another word, he helped Claire to her feet, supporting her weight as they made their way to his truck. She winced with each step, leaning heavily on him. Once she was settled in the passenger seat, Ethan climbed behind the wheel and started the engine. The ride to the nearest clinic was silent at first, the tension between them palpable. But as the miles rolled by, Ethan decided to break the ice. "So, what brings you out here?" he asked casually. "This isn't exactly the scenic route," Claire chuckled softly, though there was a hint of sadness in her laugh. "Let's just say I needed some space to think," she said vaguely, "and now I've ended up stranded because of it." Ethan nodded, sensing that she didn't want to talk about whatever had brought her to this lonely road. Instead, he steered the conversation toward safer topics, sharing stories about his life in the small town and his passion for woodworking. To his surprise, Claire listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about his craft and his dreams for the future. By the time they reached the clinic, Ethan felt like he'd known her for years, even though she remained an enigma. What neither of them realized was that this chance encounter would change both of their lives forever. As Ethan and Claire arrived at the small clinic nestled on the outskirts of town, the fluorescent lights flickered above them, casting an uneven glow over the empty parking lot. The clinic wasn't much to look at, just a single-story building, with peeling paint and a rusted sign that read "Urgent Care" in faded letters. But it was the closest place where Claire could get help for her injured ankle. Ethan parked his truck as close to the entrance as possible, wanting to make things easier for her. He turned off the engine but didn't move right away, glancing over at Claire to gauge how she was holding up. Claire sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands resting on her lap. Her face was pale, though whether from pain or something else, Ethan couldn't tell. She looked tired, almost defeated, and it struck him how different she seemed now compared to when he first saw her sitting by the side of the road. Earlier, there had been a sense of resilience about her, like someone who refused to let anything knock them down. But here, in the dim light of the clinic parking lot, she appeared vulnerable, almost fragile. It made Ethan wonder what kind of life she led outside of this moment. "Ready?" Ethan asked gently, breaking the silence. Claire blinked as if snapping out of her thoughts and nodded. "Yeah," she said softly. "Thanks again for doing this." "It's no problem," Ethan replied with a reassuring smile. "I'm just glad I happened to drive by when I did." He got out of the truck and hurried around to open the passenger door for her. With careful movements, he helped Claire step onto the ground, keeping one arm around her waist to steady her. She leaned on him heavily, wincing every time she put pressure on her injured foot. Together, they slowly made their way toward the clinic's entrance, Ethan matching his pace to hers so she wouldn't have to rush. Inside, the waiting room was quiet and nearly empty, save for a young mother trying to calm her restless toddler in the corner. A nurse seated behind a desk looked up as they entered, her expression softening when she saw Claire struggling to walk. "Can I help you?" the nurse asked kindly. "She twisted her ankle," Ethan explained. "We think it might be sprained." The nurse nodded and gestured for them to follow her into an examination room. Once inside, she instructed Claire to sit on the edge of the exam table while she fetched a doctor. As soon as the nurse left, Claire let out a deep breath, leaning back against the wall. Ethan pulled up a chair and sat beside her, offering her a reassuring smile. "You're tougher than you look," he teased lightly, hoping to lighten the mood. Claire managed a small laugh, though it sounded strained. "I feel less tough right now and more clumsy." "Hey, everyone has days like that," Ethan said with a shrug. "Besides, you've handled it pretty well so far." There was sincerity in his voice, and Claire found herself studying him more closely. He was dressed simply, in jeans and a flannel shirt covered in sawdust, and his hands were rough and calloused, clearly belonging to someone who worked with them every day. Yet there was a kindness in his eyes, a warmth that made her feel safe despite everything that had gone wrong tonight. She wondered what kind of person he truly was, beyond the surface level. "So," Claire began after a pause, "you said earlier that you're a carpenter?" Ethan nodded, his face lighting up at the mention of his work. "Yeah, I run my family's workshop. Well, I guess run is a strong word. It's more like I keep it from falling apart completely." Claire raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound easy." "It's not," Ethan admitted. "My dad started it years ago, and when he passed away, I took over. But it's been hard to keep things going, especially with all the debt we inherited. Still, I love what I do. There's something really satisfying about taking a piece of wood and turning it into something useful, or even beautiful. His passion was evident, and Claire found herself intrigued. Do you ever dream of doing something bigger, like designing buildings or working on large-scale projects? Ethan chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. I mean, sure, I've thought about it. But those kinds of opportunities don't exactly come knocking in a town like mine. Plus, I don't have the connections or the money to make it happen. For now, I'm just focused on getting through each day. Claire fell silent, her gaze dropping to her hands. Something about his words resonated with her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Maybe it was because she understood what it felt like to carry burdens that seemed impossible to shake. Or maybe it was because, for the first time, in a long time, she was talking to someone who didn't care about her title, her wealth, or her influence. To Ethan, she was just another person who needed help, and that simplicity was refreshing. A few minutes later, the doctor arrived and began examining Claire's ankle. Ethan stepped back to give them space, standing near the doorway and watching quietly. He noticed how Claire winced whenever the doctor pressed on certain spots, but she never complained. Instead, she gritted her teeth and bore the discomfort with quiet determination. Ethan admired that about her, the same resilience he'd seen earlier on the side of the road. When the examination was over, the doctor confirmed that Claire's ankle was indeed sprained. He advised her to stay off it for a few days and prescribed some pain medication. As they prepared to leave, Claire turned to Ethan with a grateful smile. I can't thank you enough for everything, she said sincerely. You didn't have to stop and help me tonight, but you did. That means a lot. Ethan waved off her gratitude with a modest grin. Like I said before, it's no big deal. Anyone would have done the same. But Claire shook her head. Not everyone. Some people wouldn't have bothered. You're different. Her words caught him off guard, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. Finally, he settled on a simple, well, I try to be. On the drive back to where Claire's car was parked, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Ethan told her funny stories about mishaps he'd experienced while working on projects, making her laugh despite her pain. In return, Claire shared bits and pieces of her own life, though she remained intentionally vague about certain details. She mentioned traveling frequently for work and dealing with stressful deadlines, but she never revealed anything that might hint at her true identity. Ethan didn't press her for information. Instead, he listened attentively, enjoying the easy flow of their conversation. When they reached her car, Ethan insisted on helping Claire transfer to the driver's seat. She protested at first, insisting that she could manage on her own, but eventually relented. Once she was settled, she rolled down the window and looked at him one last time. Before you go, she said, pulling out a pen and scribbling something on a scrap of paper. Here's my number. If you ever need anything or if you just want to talk, don't hesitate to call. Ethan accepted the note with a surprised expression. Are you sure? I mean, we barely know each other. Claire smiled, her eyes softening. Sometimes, the people we meet unexpectedly end up being the ones who matter most. Don't forget that. With that, she started the engine and drove off, leaving Ethan standing in the middle of the road, the slip of paper clutched tightly in his hand. He watched until her taillights disappeared into the distance, feeling a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him. Gratitude, curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite name. Whatever it was, he knew one thing for certain. His encounter with Claire was far from ordinary, and it might just change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The next few days passed in a blur for Ethan. Life returned to its usual rhythm. Early mornings at the workshop, late nights tinkering with unfinished projects, and the constant hum of financial worries lingering in the back of his mind. Yet, something about his encounter with Claire stayed with him. He replayed their conversation in his head more times than he cared to admit, marveling at how effortlessly she had opened up to him, even if only partially. There was something magnetic about her, a quiet strength that intrigued him. But as much as he thought about her, he didn't expect to hear from her again. After all, people like Claire, well-dressed, confident, and clearly accustomed to a life far beyond his small-town existence, didn't usually cross paths with someone like him twice. Still, Ethan tucked the piece of paper with her number into his wallet, unsure whether he'd ever use it. For now, he focused on what mattered most, keeping the workshop afloat. The debts were mounting, and the old equipment groaned under the strain of daily use. Every squeaky hinge and splintered plank reminded him of how precarious his situation was. On particularly tough days, when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, he found himself thinking about Claire's parting words. Sometimes, the people we meet unexpectedly end up being the ones who matter most. Those words gave him a strange sense of hope, though he couldn't explain why. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Ethan, Claire was doing some reflecting of her own. Back in the city, she sat in her sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the bustling streets below. Her ankle was healing well, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the young carpenter who had shown her such unexpected kindness. She had met countless people over the years, business partners, investors, celebrities, but none of them had left an impression quite like Ethan. There was something genuine about him, something raw and unpolished that felt refreshingly real in a world often dominated by pretense and ambition. Claire decided to dig deeper. Using the name Ethan had mentioned and the address of his workshop, which she remembered from their brief conversation, she began researching him. At first, it was just curiosity driving her, a desire to understand the man who had gone out of his way to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. But as she learned more about his story, her interest deepened into admiration. She discovered that Ethan's father had been a respected craftsman in the community, known for his intricate woodwork and dedication to quality. When he passed away, unexpectedly, Ethan had taken over the family business, determined to honor his legacy. Unfortunately, the workshop was struggling financially, burdened by medical bills from his father's illness and outdated machinery that couldn't keep up with modern demands. Despite these challenges, Ethan refused to give up. He poured every ounce of energy into his work, taking pride in each project, no matter how small. Claire also learned about Ethan's reputation in the town. Neighbors spoke highly of him, praising his honesty, hard work, and willingness to lend a hand whenever needed. One elderly woman recounted how Ethan had fixed her broken porch railing for free because she couldn't afford to pay. Another neighbor described how he spent hours teaching local kids the basics of woodworking during summer break. These stories painted a picture of a man who embodied integrity and compassion, qualities Claire valued deeply but rarely encountered in her high-powered corporate world. Moved by what she had uncovered, Claire felt compelled to act. However, she knew better than to approach Ethan directly. Doing so might come across as intrusive or condescending, especially given the vast difference in their circumstances. Instead, she devised a plan to support him in a way that would feel organic and meaningful. A week after their meeting, Ethan arrived at the workshop one morning to find an unfamiliar delivery truck parked outside. Curious, he walked over to investigate. The driver handed him a clipboard and asked for a signature, explaining that the shipment was addressed to him. Confused, Ethan signed the form and watched as the driver unloaded several large crates. Inside, he found brand new tools. Everything, from a state-of-the-art table saw to a professional-grade sander. There was also a note attached to one of the boxes written in elegant handwriting. For those who build with integrity, may these tools help bring your dreams to life. Ethan stared at the note, his heart racing. Who could have sent this? His first instinct was to think it might be a gift from a satisfied customer, but none of his clients had the means to afford such expensive equipment. He racked his brain, trying to figure out who else might have done this. Then, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. Could it be Claire? She had seemed genuinely grateful the night they met, but this level of generosity felt almost too much to believe. Despite the mystery surrounding the gift, Ethan couldn't deny the impact it had on his work. With the new tools, he was able to complete projects faster and with greater precision than ever before. Word spread quickly through the town about the improvements at the workshop, and soon, orders began pouring in. People started commissioning custom furniture pieces, renovations, and even larger-scale projects like gazebos and pergolas. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a glimmer of optimism about the future. But Claire wasn't done yet. Around the same time, Ethan received a letter in the mail. It was printed on thick cream-colored paper and bore the logo of a prestigious real estate development company. Intrigued, he opened it and began reading. The letter invited him to submit designs for a competition aimed at creating sustainable housing solutions for urban areas. The winning design would not only earn a substantial cash prize, but also be implemented in a major redevelopment project led by the company. At first, Ethan dismissed the idea. What did he, a small-town carpenter, know about designing entire buildings? Surely the competition would attract architects and engineers with years of experience and advanced degrees. How could he possibly compete against them? Still, the challenge intrigued him. He had always dreamed of expanding his skills beyond crafting individual pieces of furniture, and this seemed like an opportunity too good to pass up. Determined to give it his best shot, Ethan spent countless hours sketching ideas, experimenting with different materials, and refining his vision. He drew inspiration from nature, imagining structures that blended seamlessly with their surroundings while prioritizing sustainability. His design featured modular wooden homes made from locally sourced timber, incorporating green roofs, solar panels, and innovative insulation techniques. Each element was carefully thought out, reflecting both his passion for craftsmanship and his commitment to environmental responsibility. As the submission deadline approached, Ethan worked tirelessly to finalize his proposal. He poured his heart into every detail, determined to create something that truly represented who he was and what he believed in. When he finally sealed the envelope and dropped it into the mailbox, he felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Regardless of the outcome, he knew he had pushed himself further than ever before. What Ethan didn't realize was that Claire had orchestrated the entire competition as a way to provide opportunities for talented individuals like him. As the CEO of the company sponsoring the event, she personally reviewed each entry, looking forward to seeing Ethan's design among the submissions. Though she tried to remain impartial, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride knowing that her actions had inspired him to take this leap of faith. Little did Ethan know, his journey was only beginning. The kindness he had shown Claire that fateful night on the road was about to come full circle, setting the stage for a transformation neither of them could have anticipated. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan tried to focus on his work, though the memory of submitting his design for the competition lingered in the back of his mind. He had done his best, but deep down, he doubted that his humble proposal stood a chance against the seasoned professionals and big-name architects who were likely competing. Still, there was a small part of him, a flicker of hope, that clung to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his hard work would be recognized. After all, he had poured his heart into the project, crafting every detail with care and drawing inspiration from the values closest to him: sustainability, simplicity, and beauty. Despite his doubts, life at the workshop continued to improve thanks to the mysterious tools he had received. The new equipment allowed him to take on more complex projects, and his reputation grew beyond the boundaries of his small town. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon people from neighboring areas began reaching out, asking if he could help with their renovations or custom furniture needs. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was finally gaining some traction. His workshop buzzed with activity, and for once he didn't have to worry about how he'd pay the next utility bill. Still, the looming uncertainty of the competition gnawed at him. Every day he checked his mailbox, half expecting an envelope, bearing news of rejection. But as weeks passed without any word, he started to convince himself that he hadn't made the cut. "It's fine," he told himself one evening as he locked up the workshop. "You gave it your best shot. That's what matters." But fate had other plans. One crisp morning, as Ethan sipped his coffee and flipped through a stack of invoices, he heard the familiar sound of a letter dropping through the mail slot. He set his mug down and walked over to retrieve it, glancing at the return address before tearing it open. It was from the same real estate development company, the one sponsoring the competition. His pulse quickened as he unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning the words eagerly. To his astonishment, the letter informed him that his design had won first place. Out of hundreds of submissions, his proposal had been chosen as the winner. The judges praised his innovative approach, calling it a perfect blend of functionality, sustainability, and artistry. They highlighted how his modular wooden homes addressed critical environmental concerns while maintaining affordability and aesthetic appeal. The letter went on to explain that his design would serve as the centerpiece of a massive urban redevelopment project aimed at revitalizing underserved communities. Ethan read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling slightly. He couldn't believe it. Me, he thought, still struggling to process the news. How did I win this? A wave of emotions washed over him. Shock, disbelief, pride, and gratitude, all swirling together until he wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Finally, he let out a breathless laugh and sank onto a nearby stool, clutching the letter tightly. The prize money alone was staggering, an amount so large that it nearly erased all of his debts overnight. But more importantly, the opportunity to implement his design meant that his work would touch countless lives. It was validation on a scale he had never imagined possible. He immediately called his mother, who had moved to another town after her husband's death, to share the news. She cried tears of joy, telling him how proud his father would have been. Then he texted a few close friends, who responded with messages of congratulations and disbelief. Everyone kept saying the same thing. Ethan, you deserve this. As thrilled as he was, however, there was one person Ethan wished he could thank personally. Claire. Her encouragement during their brief encounter, and the anonymous gift of tools, had played a significant role in getting him to this point. If not for her, he might never have entered the competition in the first place. Determined to express his gratitude, he pulled out the slip of paper with her number and dialed it hesitantly. To his disappointment, the call went straight to voicemail. He left a short message, thanking her for believing in him and inviting her to visit the workshop whenever she had time. A few days later, Ethan received instructions to attend the official award ceremony in the city where the development company was headquartered. Nervous but excited, he packed a suit, one of the only formal outfits he owned, and prepared for the trip. As the date approached, he rehearsed what he would say during his acceptance speech, determined to convey his appreciation for the opportunity. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him when he arrived. The ceremony took place in a grand ballroom filled with glittering chandeliers, polished marble floors, and rows of elegantly dressed attendees. Ethan felt out of place among the crowd, his calloused hands gripping the edges of his rented tie as he scanned the room nervously. He spotted several renowned architects and designers chatting animatedly, their confidence making him feel even more self-conscious. Still, he reminded himself why he was here, to celebrate his achievement and honor the values that had guided him throughout his journey. When it was time for the awards presentation, the host stepped onto the stage and began announcing the winners in various categories. Finally, they reached the top prize, the one Ethan had won. As his name was called, he rose from his seat, his legs wobbling slightly as he made his way to the stage. The applause was thunderous, and for a moment, he forgot his nerves, basking in the warmth of the moment. When he reached the podium, he took a deep breath and began speaking. "I still can't quite believe I'm standing here today," he admitted with a nervous laugh. "This is far bigger than anything I ever dreamed of achieving. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that kindness and belief can change lives. Someone once told me that the people we meet unexpectedly often end up being the ones who matter most. Those words stuck with me, and they're part of the reason I'm here today. So, whoever you are, thank you for inspiring me to keep going, even when things felt impossible." His voice cracked slightly as he finished, and the audience erupted into applause again. Little did Ethan know that the person he was thanking was seated just a few rows away, watching him with a proud smile. After the ceremony, Ethan mingled awkwardly with the other guests, feeling both honored and overwhelmed by the attention. Then, as he was about to leave, a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "Congratulations, Ethan." He turned around to see Claire standing there, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her presence commanding yet warm. For a moment, he simply stared at her, too stunned to speak. Then recognition dawned, and his eyes widened in realization. "It was you," he said softly, his voice filled with awe. "You sent the tools and organized the competition." Claire nodded, her expression softening. "I wanted to give back, to someone who reminded me of what truly matters. Your kindness that night on the road stayed with me. And when I learned about your struggles, I knew I had to find a way to support you." Ethan shook his head, overwhelmed by the revelation. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You don't need to thank me," Claire replied gently. "You earned this. All I did was create the opportunity. You're the one who seized it." They talked for a long time that evening, sharing stories and reflecting on how their paths had crossed. Claire explained that her own life had been at a crossroads when they met. She had been questioning her priorities and searching for meaning beyond her corporate success. Meeting Ethan had reignited her belief in the power of human connection and inspired her to use her resources to uplift others. By the end of the night, Ethan realized that Claire wasn't just a stranger who had helped him. She was someone who understood him on a deeper level. Their bond, forged through mutual respect and shared values, felt stronger than ever. As they parted ways, promising to stay in touch, Ethan couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. In the weeks following the award ceremony, Ethan's life changed in ways he could never have anticipated. The recognition from the competition opened doors he had only dreamed of, and his name began to appear in industry magazines and local news articles. Reporters flocked to his small-town workshop, eager to hear the story of the underdog carpenter who had beaten seasoned architects to win a prestigious design competition. At first, Ethan felt uncomfortable with all the attention. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the constant interviews and photo shoots made him feel like an imposter. But as time went on, he realized that this was his chance to share his passion with a wider audience, to show people that craftsmanship and sustainability weren't just ideals, but practical solutions for building a better future. Claire played a pivotal role in helping Ethan navigate this new chapter of his life. She became both a mentor and a friend, offering guidance on everything from public speaking to networking with influential figures in the architecture and real estate industries. Though their backgrounds were vastly different, they complemented each other perfectly. Claire's sharp business acumen balanced Ethan's creative vision, and together, they formed a partnership that felt natural and genuine. She introduced him to key players in her company and encouraged him to attend conferences and events where he could showcase his work. Each step of the way, she reminded him to stay true to himself and his values. One of the most exciting developments came when Claire announced that her company would be funding the construction of Ethan's modular wooden homes as part of a pilot project in an underserved urban neighborhood. The goal was to create affordable, eco-friendly housing that could serve as a model for similar initiatives across the country. Ethan was deeply involved in every stage of the process, from overseeing the manufacturing of materials to collaborating with engineers to ensure the structural integrity of the designs. It was challenging work requiring long hours and countless revisions, but Ethan thrived under the pressure. For the first time, he felt like he was making a real difference, not just in his own life, but in the lives of others. As the project progressed, Ethan found himself traveling frequently between his hometown and the city where the development was taking place. These trips gave him more opportunities to spend time with Claire, and their friendship deepened with each passing day. They often met for coffee or dinner, discussing everything from their childhoods to their dreams for the future. Ethan learned that Claire had grown up in a strict household, where success was measured solely by wealth and status. Her parents had pushed her relentlessly, leaving little room for personal fulfillment. It wasn't until she inherited the family business, after her father's sudden death, that she began to question whether she was truly happy. Meeting Ethan had been a turning point for her, a reminder that money and power meant nothing without purpose and connection. For Ethan, these conversations were eye-opening. He had always assumed that someone like Claire, with her luxurious lifestyle and high-profile career, must have had it easy. But hearing about her struggles made him realize that everyone carried burdens, no matter how successful they appeared on the surface. In many ways, their shared vulnerabilities brought them closer together. They understood each other in a way that few others could, and their bond grew stronger with each passing week. The highlight of the project came when the first set of modular homes was completed. Ethan stood on the edge of the construction site, watching as families moved into their new homes. Many of them had previously lived in cramped, dilapidated apartments, struggling to make ends meet. Now, thanks to Ethan's design and Claire's resources, they had safe, comfortable places to call their own. Children ran through the narrow streets, laughing and playing, while adults exchanged smiles and hugs, grateful for the fresh start they had been given. Seeing the joy on their faces filled Ethan with a sense of pride and accomplishment that no amount of money could buy. Claire joined him at the site later that afternoon, holding a clipboard and wearing a wide-brimmed hat to shield herself from the sun. "Well," she said, surveying the scene with a satisfied smile, "looks like we've done something good here." Ethan nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "This is more than I ever imagined. To think that my design could actually change people's lives, it's incredible." "You deserve all the credit," Claire replied firmly. "You're the one who created this. I just helped bring it to life." They spent the rest of the day touring the neighborhood, meeting residents and listening to their stories. One elderly woman invited them inside her new home, proudly showing off the custom-built cabinets and handcrafted furniture that Ethan had designed specifically for her. Another family thanked them for creating a space where their children could play safely. Each interaction reinforced the impact of their work, leaving both Ethan and Claire humbled and inspired. Back in the city, the media coverage of the project continued to grow. News outlets praised the innovative design and highlighted the collaboration between Ethan and Claire as a shining example of how private enterprise could drive positive social change. Invitations to speak at conferences and universities poured in, and Ethan found himself sharing stages with some of the biggest names in the industry. At first, he felt intimidated, but Claire coached him on how to present confidently and authentically. Over time, he became more comfortable speaking publicly, using his platform to advocate for sustainable building practices and community-focused development. Through it all, Ethan remained grounded, never forgetting where he came from. He hired several locals to help expand his workshop, training them in woodworking and design. He also started a mentorship program for young artisans, teaching them the skills he had learned from his father. His goal was to pass on the same knowledge and values that had shaped his own journey, ensuring that the next generation would carry the torch. Claire watched Ethan's transformation with quiet admiration. She saw how he balanced ambition with humility, how he used his success not just for personal gain but for the greater good. It made her reflect on her own life, on the legacy she wanted to leave behind. Inspired by Ethan's example, she began exploring ways to integrate social responsibility into her company's core mission. Together, they brainstormed ideas for future projects, envisioning a world where innovation and compassion went hand in hand. By the end of the year, Ethan and Claire had become inseparable partners, not just professionally, but personally as well. Their relationship evolved naturally, built on mutual respect, trust, and a shared commitment to making a difference. While neither of them rushed to define what they had, there was an unspoken understanding that they were better together than apart. Whether they were walking through the bustling streets of the city or sitting quietly in Ethan's workshop, surrounded by the scent of freshly cut wood, they found comfort and joy in each other's company. Looking back, Ethan couldn't believe how far he had come. From struggling to keep his family's workshop afloat to winning a national design competition and transforming communities, his journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. And at the heart of it all was Claire, the stranger whose life he had touched on a lonely stretch of road, unaware that she would go on to change his forever. As snow began to fall over the town one December evening, Ethan stood outside his workshop, gazing at the twinkling lights strung along the roof. Inside, Claire was waiting for him, sipping hot cocoa and flipping through sketches for their next project. Life was full of surprises, Ethan thought with a smile. And sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness could lead to the greatest rewards. The years that followed were transformative. not just for Ethan and Claire, but for the countless lives they touched through their shared vision. What had started as a chance encounter on a quiet country road blossomed into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Their partnership became a beacon of hope, proving that collaboration between unlikely allies could create lasting change in the world. Ethan's career skyrocketed after the success of the pilot housing project. His designs gained widespread recognition, earning him accolades from environmental organizations, architectural societies, and even government agencies. The modular wooden homes he had envisioned were replicated across multiple cities, providing affordable, sustainable housing to families who otherwise would have been left behind. Each new development was tailored to its community, incorporating local materials and cultural elements while staying true to Ethan's original principles of simplicity and functionality. People began referring to his work as architecture with a soul, a testament to how deeply personal and meaningful his creations felt. But Ethan never let fame or success go to his head. Despite the growing demands on his time, he remained committed to his roots. He continued running his workshop, now expanded into a thriving hub of creativity and learning. Young artisans from all over the region came to train under him, eager to learn the art of woodworking and design. Ethan taught them not only technical skills, but also the importance of integrity, patience, and perseverance. Many of his students went on to start their own businesses, spreading Ethan's influence far beyond what he could have achieved alone. To him, there was no greater reward than knowing he had helped others build better futures for themselves. Claire, too, underwent her own transformation. Inspired by Ethan's humility and dedication, she redefined her company's mission to prioritize social impact alongside profitability. Under her leadership, the organization launched initiatives aimed at reducing carbon footprints, supporting small businesses, and empowering marginalized communities. She often credited Ethan for reigniting her passion for purpose-driven work, saying that meeting him had reminded her why she fell in love with architecture in the first place: the power to shape spaces that brought people together. Together, they formed a dynamic duo, blending innovation with compassion to tackle some of society's most pressing challenges. Their bond deepened with every passing year. While their relationship remained grounded in mutual respect and admiration, it evolved into something more intimate. Neither of them rushed into anything. Instead, they allowed their connection to grow organically, nurtured by shared experiences and late-night conversations about their dreams and fears. One evening, as they sat side by side on the porch of Ethan's newly renovated home, a cozy cabin nestled in the woods, Claire turned to him with a soft smile. "You know," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia, "I never thought I'd find someone like you." Ethan chuckled, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean? Someone who fixes broken chairs and builds houses out of wood?" "No," Claire replied, shaking her head. "Someone who reminds me of what really matters. Someone who sees the good in people, even when they don't see it themselves." Her words caught him off guard, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. Finally, he reached for her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "You're the one who changed my life, Claire. Without you, none of this would have been possible." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars twinkle above the treetops. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of each other's presence, they both knew that their journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, obstacles to overcome, and dreams yet to be realized. But whatever lay in store, they faced it together. As the seasons changed, so did their projects. Ethan and Claire collaborated on ambitious ventures that pushed the boundaries of sustainable design. From eco-friendly schools in rural areas to community centers powered entirely by renewable energy, their work became a symbol of what was possible when creativity met compassion. They traveled extensively, visiting sites, meeting residents, and ensuring that every project reflected the unique needs and aspirations of the people it served. Along the way, they inspired others to join their cause, building a network of like-minded individuals dedicated to creating a brighter, more equitable future. Back home, their lives intertwined in ways that felt both natural and profound. Claire sold her penthouse apartment in the city and moved to Ethan's hometown, trading skyscrapers for rolling hills and bustling streets for quiet mornings. She embraced the slower pace of life, finding joy in simple pleasures like gardening, cooking meals together, and exploring the countryside. For Ethan, having Claire by his side filled a void he hadn't realized existed. Her unwavering support gave him the confidence to dream bigger, to take risks he might have otherwise shied away from. Together they created a life that balanced ambition with contentment, adventure with stability. One spring morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He tiptoed downstairs, careful not to disturb Claire, and stepped outside onto the dewy grass. In his hands he held a small wooden box he had been working on for weeks. It was intricately carved, adorned with delicate patterns that told the story of their journey, from the night they met to the countless milestones they had celebrated since. Inside the box was a ring, simple yet elegant, crafted from a piece of oak he had saved from his father's workshop. When Claire joined him a few minutes later, wrapped in a blanket and yawning sleepily, Ethan knelt before her, holding out the eye. Tears welled up in her eyes as she opened it, her breath catching in her throat. "Claire," he said softly, his voice steady despite the emotion swirling inside him. "You've been my greatest gift. Will you spend the rest of your life reminding me of what truly matters?" Without hesitation, she nodded, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with happiness. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding was a modest affair, held in the backyard of Ethan's workshop. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered under strings of fairy lights, laughing, dancing, and sharing stories late into the night. Claire wore a vintage dress she had found at a local boutique, while Ethan donned a suit made from fabric dyed with natural pigments. The air buzzed with love and laughter, a celebration not just of their union but of the countless lives they had touched along the way. In the years that followed, Ethan and Claire continued to build, not just structures, but a legacy rooted in kindness, resilience, and hope. They welcomed children into their family, teaching them the values they held dear, the importance of hard work, the beauty of giving back, and the power of believing in oneself. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with laughter, creativity, and the comforting scent of freshly cut wood. Looking back on their journey, Ethan often marveled at how everything had come full circle. That fateful night on the road, when he stopped to help a stranger in need, had set off a chain of events that transformed his life in ways he could never have predicted. And Claire, once a mysterious woman with a shattered phone and a sprained ankle, had become his partner in every sense of the word. The person who believed in him when he doubted himself, who stood by his side through triumphs and trials, and who reminded him daily of the goodness in the world. Together they proved that true wealth wasn't measured in money or possessions, but in the connections we forge and the lives we touch. Through acts of kindness, courage, and unwavering determination, they built not just a brighter future for themselves, but for everyone lucky enough to cross their path. And as they stood side by side, hand in hand, gazing at the horizon, they knew that their story was just beginning, one chapter in a lifetime of building and rebuilding the world around them.